education programs, care of boys or minors during the first few months of after they're born, making sure that parents are going for health support, giving them economic support, but also academic support to encourage them staying at school. The implementation of these programs, evidence shows that it's very important to have the articulation of the educational systems with the health systems and also the social protection systems. And also the importance of not only ensuring the reinsertion of parents into the educational system, but also to provide sustained, accompaniment or support to ensure that they remain in school. A third group are the early alert systems that unite within a same platform different sources of information that are useful to detect in a timely manner the students that are at risk of abandoning school and to implement timely actions. These programs or these early alert systems started being developed after the pandemic a lot, but they're still at an early stage in the region because they are highly fragmented. So what we need to do is to strengthen the interoperability of the different information systems of different institutions. Next slide, please. A fourth group of programs are the conditioned transfer programs or scholarships. These facilitate, reducing the pressure on incomes, home incomes or household incomes, and to avoid child labor because, it is maybe explicitly, or maybe because it increases the cost of opportunity of not going or attending to school. So among the main conclusions of our program or the reviewing these programs in the region is that in many cases, the transfers or the scholarships or money transfers or the scholarship does not ensure the continuity of studying of schools nor a better performance. So it's not only encouraging them to stay at school. Many times the magnitude of the money transfers is not enough to respond to the economic needs of households or of students. And so in the end, it's not truly addressing the incentives for them to not participate in child labor. And finally, a fifth group of programs that have been identified in the program are the educational supply flexibility to encourage school reinsertion. So changing the normal format like the curriculum or the length of the cycle of or the way that the education is delivered, maybe in digital schedules that are delivered. These programs have been fundamental to expand the coverage in the region, and the flexibilization of these forms or modalities of delivery does not impact the quality of the education delivered. Next, please. With respect to the strategies for the protection and employment reconversion, like I mentioned, there are three groups of programs. Next one, there is the apprenticeship or interns programs, which are the programs that coordinate theoretical training and practical experience in this event, so training programs for professional development for adolescents in working age, and also employment subsidy programs to hire people that are in vulnerable situations. Empirical evidence shows better results for the first group of programs. In other words, with that combine theoretical with practical experience. And it's also observed that in some occasions, these programs contribute to the fact of people to, show less rates of informality in education and more access to higher education. So the problems in training programs, sometimes there's the lack of relevance of the content of the courses with the demands in companies and the interests of students, and within the limitations of the subsidies to employment is that they might have a low coverage at companies, maybe due to lack of information or because of high related administrative costs. Next, please. Now, very briefly, I'm going to finish my presentation to move on to the round table. So, summarizing the lessons learned from the regional experiences related to these programs that I've mentioned. Next slide, please. With respect to the lessons learned in the educational programs that want to prevent school abandonment and, in consequence, child labor, first is that they are not enough on their own to ensure the continuity for the population it wants to benefit. Evidence shows the need of implementing holistic or comprehensive support throughout the trajectory of students, not only ensuring the reinsertion, but also to sustain or maintain their participation in the school system through the articulation and of education with other social protection policies, health, transportation, among others. A second conclusion is that the magnitude of money transfers has never been enough to respond to the economic needs of households, boys, girls, and adolescents. And a third conclusion is that it is necessary to have clear diagnostics about the needs of students in risk of abandonment. And for this, the early alert systems and to ensure the interoperability between the different information systems are more useful. With regards to safe employment programs for adolescents of working age, one first conclusion is to make the conditions more flexible so that companies can be able to participate in the programs and for adolescents to become eligible for these types of work. For example, many times they are demanded or they request that adolescents need to be in the educational or in the school system and not have employment experience or to have employment experience. And many times adolescents do not have these requirements. A second conclusion is that it's important to implement greater incentives so that both adolescents as well as employers can have the motivation to participate in these programs. And a third conclusion is that it's important for programs to hopefully finish off with a certification of education and experience of the adolescents that participate so that this can be recognized elsewhere in the country and for them to be able to accredit or certify their knowledge and experience when going into the labor market to improve their chances in the employment sector in the future. So we wrap up here. One of the main conclusions of the study is that child labor that has multiple causes, that it's not possible to address it with only one type of intervention, but it needs the articulation of different public policies, whether educational, of employment, of health, of social protection, among others. And this requires the involvement of different stakeholders, whether from the public sector as well as the private sector. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mariana, for this excellent and succinct presentation that helps us to keep in mind the clear interactions between the factors that push people into child labor as well as school abandonment or desertion, and also to truly have in mind the potential strategies in both areas that truly aim to reduce inequality that serves as a common genesis of many of these catalyzers. So, according to one of the key goals or objectives of today's event, which is to encourage the dialogue between key stakeholders and regional partners and allies in the fight against child labor, we, with us here, have a panel or roundtable of highlighted, government groups of employers and workers, active members of the regional initiative, as well as representatives of institutions that are associated or partners with the ILO and the United Nations system. It is for me an honor to welcome our next speakers, Dr. Isabel Alaton Santander. She is the Subdirector of Employment Protection and Fundamental Rights in the Ministry of Labor of Colombia. Ms. Nayeli Dominguez, Secretariat of Social Policies in the Confederation of Union of Workers of the Americas, and focal point of the employment sector in the regional initiative, Mrs. Marlene Mazariegos, manager of the employment area and coordinator of the workers network of prevention against child labor of the agricultural businesses committee, and also or CACIF from Guatemala. She is also a focal point of the employer sector in the regional initiative. And also with us here, I have the honor of welcoming Mrs. Elena Montoyo, Director of the Inter-American Sector for the Development or Training, or Sinterfort, which is a technical service of ILO, and Mr. Omar Calero, Specialist in Technical Education and Professional Training of the UNESCO in Peru. So, in order to start this discussion, Dr. Agaton Santander, I would like to invite you to share with us from the perspective of your government and according to the results of the study, how is it possible to contribute, to promote or contribute with educational strategies for our boys, girls, and adolescents? Doctor? Thank you very much, dear Riesel. I especially greet very especially to everyone joining us in this panel today. And I also celebrate this study, which is so important globally and also for the region of the Americas. So I would like to start by responding to the question in the following way. Yes, effectively, the actions that from this ministry we believe are important to highlight and to strengthen are aimed fundamentally to the following aspects. The first one of them, Rachel, we cannot hear her. Just a minute, our technical team is looking at this audio issue. Her microphone seems to be off. Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you. So the first one of them is related with the strengthening of the economic strengthening of families through work. So in that sense, we need to highlight that child labor, as was mentioned, has multiple factors or causes. And one of them, one of the most important one, but not the only one, is poverty and the economic vulnerability of Colombian families. And for this reason, to avoid child labor and to encourage the educational strategies of boys, girls, and adolescents, it is important to strengthen the income of adults in the household. So the mothers or fathers or caregivers from our Ministry of Labor, it is possible to contribute to the economic strengthening of families in both ways. The first one is providing tools to access to the employment market through training programs, training and employment, and also strengthening the employment benefits, salary-wise, and benefits of those who are already in a working relationship. The second aspect that we consider of vital importance is related to the prevention of teenage pregnancies and employment programs for adolescents who are mothers or fathers. And that's also something that the study highlights. in that sense, we believe it is very important to precisely contribute in the continuity of boys, girls, and adolescents in the educational processes, and for which it is important to generate actions to prevent teenage pregnancy as a matter of public policy and access to sexual health and reproductive health, as was highlighted by the study, to the sexual and reproduction rights. At the same time, a way to ensure the staying within educational systems on behalf of parents for adolescents of the ages between 15 and 18 is to extend the supply of staying in school within the framework of adolescents employment to address this area. So mothers and fathers or adolescent mothers and fathers can be able to access to helping the family without that being a risk or a vulneration to their right to education. So a way to extend employment supply are the programs to encourage companies to engage or involve mothers or fathers who are adolescents, overseeing the compliance of regulation for protected adolescent work. We also believe it is important to have early alert systems for the risk of early abandonment on adolescents and child labor from our CDT, which is our integrated system of information for the registry of child labor and its worst forms. It is important to generate those early alert systems that identifies boys, girls, and adolescents who are at risk of child labor and who are at risk of abandoning school. With this last risk, it is possible to contribute to a greater permanence or reincorporation or to the educational system through articulation programs, both with the National Ministry of Education of our country, as well as with the Colombian Institute of Family Wellbeing in Colombia. And lastly, to end with this last question, we believe it is important to strengthen and to encourage training programs for adolescents between the ages of 15 and 8 years old, with the goal of strengthening or working for that training for adolescents from the center, which is the National Service of Learning. This is a Colombian institution, which is very important for that type of technical training in order to develop the skills for professional education and training and to improve the conditions of access to the employment market.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Doctor. These are examples and key examples. I'd like to highlight that one of the first things you highlighted is the importance of strengthening the situation, the economic situation of the family, focusing on access to decent work and how the inequality is a key aspect, is a catalyst. Therefore, it is important to highlight the financial and economic well-being of the families through decent work programs for the strengthening of decent work. Now, Ms. Mazariegos, Marlene, to complement the shared considerations or comments by the doctor from the government's perspective. Now, considering the employer's sector's perspective, what can you do to support the maintenance of educational consistent plans for children and adolescents? The floor is yours. Thanks. Thank you, Rezo. it's a great pleasure to join you today in such an important event, allowing us to confirm that from the employers sector, we address this problematic in a comprehensive way. We want a coordinated approach with a public private partnership. And what the doctor says makes sense. The public private partnership from the employers sector and addressing girls, boys, and adolescents. Well, the sector in Guatemala adopted the human approach, recognizing the guiding principle and acknowledging the role of the companies of respecting human rights. Allow me just a moment. I believe I'm getting a message about my language. Allow me to choose my language so everyone can hear me. My apologies. Just a moment, please. Just a second. Okay, done. As I was saying, the framework for this policy on human rights addresses the specific role of enterprises or businesses, respecting the human rights without forgetting the role of the states, guaranteeing the rights for boys, girls, and adolescents. And from the agricultural sector, we adopted our own policies on human rights. And this becomes part of the sustainability strategy of the sector, joining the rest of the efforts that we've had or we've made for many years, including the labor policy since 2012 and other strategies like the prevention and eradication of child labor in the business sector since 2015, and different programs from the agro chamber that we've had for many, many years. The labor policy aims to promote the increase of formal employment with social coverage. As the doctor mentioned, it is important to guarantee formal employment for uh, parents that are also part of the community. And for this policy, we have a strategic access to create the social conditions to eliminate child labor. This means that we recognize that it is important to work on social conditions so we can eradicate child labor. Principle number 5 of the labor policy has been titled Boys and Girls in School, establishing the commitment that we have in the sector to prohibit child labor on one hand, and also recognizing that quality education is the best tool to prevent child labor. The Agro Chamber and the Association of Business Owners for Education created a network for the prevention and eradication of child labor in 2015 with more than 20 business organizations, and in partnership with the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Education, and the ILO and FAO. With this comprehensive outlook, we have made strategic partnerships with the different institutions from the government to execute actions aiming to prevent and eradicate child labor. From the business network, we promote the strategy already outlined in the private sector for over 10 years, and we have 4 priorities led by business owners. Number 1, the compliance or complying with the minimum of 180 days of school days for private schools. Number 2, have trained and competent schools, making sure that teachers have the necessary skills to offer education. Number 3, having children that learn and with a direct participation with the health policy, because for children to learn, they need to be well fed, they need to be healthy. It's not only a matter of them going to school, but they need to do it the best way possible so they can acquire the knowledge. The 4th priority or axis that we address through this strategy is a supporting community, meaning that we include the accompaniment for the community and parents. The study and it shows that boys, girls, and the teenagers are more exposed because of informality and the lack of infrastructure, because of attrition and child labor. So from the Agro Chamber, we work on educational programs according to the National Educational Policy. These are supporting programs to the state policies, because the role of the state is to guarantee those rights. And in supporting those policies, we offer specific programs for the sector. Some of the programs that I can quickly mention, programs that address children from 4 to 18 years when they become of age, programs implemented for over 20 years ago, like Copy Kindergarten. I believe that I've had the opportunity to share these in different spaces, or the Coffee Camp. These are programs carried out in coffee farms where children can study while their parents harvest coffee or grow coffee. These programs allow children that, even though they migrated with their families, when they have to work on the harvesting of coffee, they have a place to study, allowing school permanence, because once they go back to their place of origin, they can continue with the next school year. Among other programs, and because of a lack of time, I will not overextend myself. I can mention a multi-grade school allowing children to get access to education, especially in farms. Accelerated alternative education, other programs like Better Families, and I can speak a little bit more about that later on, but this is for boys and girls. As far as the youth, I just want to mention that we work on programs related of learning based on work, that we call it ABT, through the GAM network in Guatemala, allowing us to have this type of participation with the youth. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Marlene. And I really like having information about the different interventions that you are leading from the business sector in your country. Considering the time restrictions, I'd like to invite Nayeli Dominguez, Miss Dominguez, to complement, considering the clear need of comprehensive and collaborative action in the educational space. We would like to know, because we already heard from the government representatives and the business sector, we would like to know how the workers sector can contribute to boys, girls, and adolescents to continue their studies without any type of obstacles. Nayeli, the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. I will be speaking about what we're doing, what we are promoting from the workers sector. And from the unionism in the Americas, we always say that we won't be able to eradicate child labor if we cannot achieve decent work for adults without guaranteeing social protection, including public and free education for boys, girls, and adolescents. Considering that learning is a lifelong path and education must always be guaranteed for any person at any stage of their life cycle. I believe this study is important because it gives us evidence on spaces that we see for child labor. For children of many populations, Afro-descendant, indigenous peoples, and low-income people, the health crisis in 2020 meant the end to going to school, because online connection is not a reality for many families. In this sense, it is important to say that many families do not have the possibility to receive accompaniment or support for the children from their own homes. Adding to that, the lack of internet connection or power outages or the lack of technological tools that at the end increase the school attrition. So the pandemic and the digital gap creating a larger school exclusion of more boys and girls in the educational system in the region. Therefore, it is important to advocate for governments to implement policies to go back to school with intensive programs so children can go back to school and avoid a greater distancing from the educational system. So full-time schools can be a great alternative. At the same time, we try to strengthen education guilds and a decent work for teachers. The teachers are crucial in this process. So for this segment of the working class, they play a key role for students and the students' families, the environments. They are also important to include many students that detached from the system and are now in a critical context. It is important to guarantee the participation of all the teachers in the design of educational proposals because teachers know the situation that boys and girls are facing. Educators know the challenges. Educators know the needs the children have. Therefore, the inclusion of this sector is important if we want to have more just and equitable systems. Thank you. Thank you very much, Najeli. I believe that you have introduced an interesting and important perspective, the fight for decent work, for teachers, for educators, as key actors to ensure not only the quality of the education offered to children and teenagers, but for them as part of society needing a decent work so they can increase their incomes. This is a valuable aspect, and we really thank you for your contributions, Nayeli. Considering that we have other colleagues from other institutions, so we have a colleague from the UN institution as a mandate for this topic, I'd like to take a moment and hear from Mr. Caveros. In addition to the different interventions from the tripartite partners, I would like to ask you to share how UNESCO is working to foster greater inclusion in education, especially just like Nayeli mentioned, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic effects. Hi, Rizal. Great seeing you. Greetings to all the colleagues from the panel. I know the colleagues from the regional initiative for a while. Well, the warmest greetings from UNESCO Peru, and I would like to welcome you to this important roundtable. This is a great balance, sharing intervention experiences related to child labor and the ability to summarize. I know this is no easy task in such a short time. One of the things that we can highlight is that two great areas have been identified. One, permanence, and number two, the work scope, especially for adolescents in working age. In UNESCO, we have been working on permanence in school, identifying two specific elements. Number one, attrition or school dropout. How to avoid for students to drop out from school. And the other aspect is how to ensure to have an adequate transit in all the levels of basic education. And we have done several studies in Peru, and we believe it is important to share them with you because, in addition to the factors identified, each reality has its own particularity. And the most efficient way to address this problematic is getting to know the details and getting specific information about the reality. As far as high